My name is Ken Lingeveldt. I'm from Cape Town, South Africa, born and bred, proudly Cape Townian. I'm a skateboarder. You know, people ask me, what are you, who are you? And I always say, in the context of my business, I'm a skateboarder first, then I'm a skateboard shaper, then I'm a business owner. Started skateboarding 30 years ago. Street skateboarding, I started racing. My first race was in 1999. And that's how I started my business, because we all done our first race on normal street boards, the short boards. And then there was a lack of longboards, and then I bought enough wood for one, sold one, bought enough wood for two. Pretty much that story. People ask me why Alpha, you know, and like I always say, I don't remember myself before skateboarding. I honestly don't. I try to remember the blob of meat that made sounds I was before, and that's literally how I feel I was. I can't attach any emotion or any kind of thinking to me before skateboarding. So for me, skateboarding was the beginning of like the new me, you know. And that's why Alpha, because Alpha is the beginning. And also because it changed my life, I always feel like Alpha the first. If your first board is made by me, I wanted to change your life. Growing up on the Cape Flats in the 80s, when it was quite a tumultuous time in our country, you know, if you think of the 80s on the Cape Flats, you think of the riots, you know, you think of the rallies and all these anti-apartheid movements that were happening, and the graffiti, and our walls were strewn with, like, you know, NP go home and all this stuff, and a lot of political slogans. So that was the soundtrack of the first decade of my life, you know, was the 80s. So growing up in that environment, I was always aware of art, street art specifically, you know, and how street art can take up space in your life, you know, and how important it is, you know, to spread messages. Based on the politics, so I do stuff called the local legends, which is like the boards behind me, the stencil art of the legends of the anti-apartheid struggle. You know, Nelson Mandela, Desmond Tutu, Maria Makeba, Winnie Mandela. When I got to photograph the Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and then I shot him for a documentary we were doing, and then I was like, oh, but I make boards with his face on it. I can try to sneak this in, you know. And then I did, and then I was like, yo, Mr. Tutu. So after the shoot, I'm like, Mr. Tutu, here's a board. He's like, what's this? I'm like, it's a skateboard. You put wheels in it, and you. He's like, my face. It has my face on it. And then he started chuckling and like laughing. And I always tell people, I purposely didn't put wheels on it because Desmond Tutu's the kind of guy who would want to skate the board, and I don't want to be the guy that broke Desmond Tutu's legs. The beginnings of me shaping boards. For some of my teen years, I lived in Woodstock. If you live in Woodstock, you're always gonna be on a hill somewhere. So we got used to skating down hills on our boards, going from A to B. Then we saw a poster in a shop for the first Red Bull Downhill Extreme that happened in 1999. And we saw the road, it was like Kloofnek in the Glen. And we were like, we skate Woodstock, we can skate this easy. We get to the top of the hill, we're there, like it's literally those things, you know, like if you look at those like island pictures, like you get like the ragtag cut of jeans, you know, like pretty much how we look, and like we get to the top and there's like these European and American skateboarders buffing their helmets in like their leather suits with their custom boards and stuff, and we're like, yo, this is crazy. And because of where we grew up, none of us had ever drank Red Bull in our life. It was a Red Bull event, so our ankles were shot. We were just like, yo, Red Bull, Red Bull, Red Bull. But that's so funny. Anyway, so then a friend of mine actually wanted on a small board, on a short board. You know, just because he was a surfer, like it was such a natural. But then we realized what we needed was bigger boards. And then obviously we couldn't afford bigger boards. So I was like, yeah, I'm gonna try to make my own. And because I grew up, you know, like in our communities, it was like our parents were all artisans and worked with their hands, and they were all, you know, construction workers and welders and stuff. So we all had a knack for just building stuff, you know. And then I decided to try to make my own boards, and then as I said, so like I bought wood for one board, tried it out. It worked kind of, and other people saw, and friends of mine who were in the same position saw, and then we were like, okay, cool, let's all, can you make me a board, can you make me a board? And that's how it came, you know. which is great. I mean, it's so funny because I didn't do woodwork at school. I didn't do any sort of engineering. I was never ever interested in welding or anything. And this was we didn't really have the internet. So a lot of it was just me kind of looking at a board and going, okay, maybe this, maybe that. And then, yeah, luckily the one mold I made to bend my wood in 2001 worked. And I got a friend who was a welder, and I'm like, yo, use some offcuts. And it's the same one that's made almost every single board since. So I use Malaysian Meranti, and I use Malaysian Meranti wood specifically because of our roots from the slave trade and the Malaysians, you know, so from my family's history. And also when I work with it, like when I cut it, you can smell the spiciness of it, you know, so like it's all that. So I try to blend who I am as a person into what I do. And like I love doing the custom stuff, and like for me it's a blessing to have that custom brands like Lamazaka come to me, you know, like, I mean, 10-year-old Kent would never have imagined, or like 14-year-old Kent when he started skateboarding would never have imagined that big international brands would be like, yo, can we work together, can we do boards, you know. It's still, you know, like if they were to ask me to tell 14-year-old Kent, you know, how things would be, this would not have been on my bingo card. We grew up poor, but my wealth is that as soon as I picked up a skateboard, I knew. I was like, this is me for the rest of my life. Look at the moment.
You're chatting to the people.
You must break the fourth wall.
Yeah, well, so you must.